members of the diplomatic corps, members of Parliament, members of the Chamber of Commerce and the Private Sector in general, ladies and gentlemen, before I come to my speech, I must share an agreement that has just been entered into. As you know, we politicians get very excited when we prepare before large crowds. This is a large crowd. And I inquired as to who caused it. And in light of certain events that may be coming up soon, I am to advise you that in return for giving the speech, I have arranged for Ms. Louise to be able to arrange this meeting, to arrange the meetings for the Barbados Party. She cannot break that contract. I speak to you today on the theme, managing change in an era of global economic instability. The perspective which I wish to share with you is admirably summed up in the opening sentence of V.S. Naipaul's novel, A Bend in the River, and I quote, "The world is what it is. Men who are nothing, who allow themselves to become nothing, have no place in it." End of quote. In today's world, the only thing about which we can be certain is that the global economy, by and large, will continue to be engulfed in turmoil for the foreseeable future. Indeed, the global economy is in a very dangerous and fragile situation, characterized by sluggish and uneven growth, mounting and massive fiscal deficits and sovereign debt crises in both advanced and developing countries, and the persistence of commodity, asset and credit bubbles and booms, which make the markets a hazardous place in which to do business. These imbalances and fragilities, which have been built up over several years, have led to distortions in economic structures and distortions in both public and private balance sheets, which cannot be easily corrected regardless of the policies pursued today. In addition, macroeconomic policies that have been traditionally been relied upon to stabilize or to stimulate economic systems are now also proven to be of limited effect. For example, the deep-seated structural problems, such as those being experienced by the United States of America, simply cannot be resolved by recourse to short-term expedients such as monetary and fiscal stimuli, but will require virtually the reindustrialization of a continental-sized economy. Paradoxically, the response to the crisis in advanced economies that has taken the form of large-scale liquidity creation and sharp cuts in interest rates may be helping to create growth bubbles not in the advanced countries themselves, but in commodity markets and in emerging economies as cheap money roams globally in search of its highest yield. The capital and the commodity bubbles which are now behind the appearance of strong growth in some emerging economies could themselves be affected if the cheap money era is brought to an end by the return to interest rate normalcy in the advanced economies of the world. In such circumstances, the global economy is unlikely to make a smooth transition to a path of stable, sustained, and broad-based growth. In addition, despite growing global economic interdependence, especially in respect of production and finance, there is a distinct lack of multilateral authority and discipline over the fiscal, the macroeconomic, financial, and exchange rate policies of those countries which are in a position to exert a disproportionately large influence on global economic affairs. The G20 has indeed proven to be a spectacularly ineffective mechanism for managing the economic conditions of their own economies, far less that of the world. And it is a sobering but frightening reflection that the economic circumstances of a country like Barbados can be at the mercy of the machinations which pass for governance in the United States Congress and Senate. For our immediate purposes here in Barbados, it is important that we take notice of a certain two-track type of development in this unstable global economy. The first is that there has been a shift in global economic activity and growth away from the advanced economies to the emerging developing countries, a shift which is likely to perpetuate itself as the developed economies implement measures to deal with their debt crises. Barbados has not been a beneficiary of this shift, since the countries where growth is now greatest in the world are not major markets for Barbadian goods and services. Secondly, global economic conditions have not had an equally adverse effect in every place or circumstance. For example, Canada and the Caribbean, which have the best regulated and best supervised financial systems, did not experience the kind of turbulence in their financial markets which triggered the recent global recession in the first instance. Equally, some developing countries, through the use of strong and effective policy responses, have already rebounded from recession and are on the path to sustained growth. Indeed, in our region, the Guyanese economy has grown over the past 4 years, and in 2011 is growing at a rate of 5%, which we in Barbados can only marvel at. For every example of a breach, therefore, we can therefore hold up the superior counterpoise of a Singapore. And once all of these developments are understood, the following inferences hold. The first is that it would be a fatal error for us in Barbados to act on the presumption that our best or our only good option is to ride out the global recession in the belief that once the sluggishness slid, happy days will be here again. As indicated earlier, there is unlikely to be a quick, orderly, or strong recovery in that part of the global economy on which we rely largely for our demand for our goods and services. But equally, we have to stop feeling powerless to make things better for ourselves merely because there is instability in the global economy. Today, I say to you that small societies like Barbados have always lived a hazardous and difficult experience in which responding to crisis has been our usual and our ordinary business. In that sense, the recent and existing instability and vicissitudes in the international economy have merely heightened our traditional, usual, and familiar circumstances. What will become of us will therefore depend not only on the fact that we live in an era of global instability, it will rather depend upon how accurately we define and order the challenges with which we are confronted. But it will even more come to depend upon the soundness and the creativity of the measures we deploy to create a successful and sustainable niche for ourselves in an admittedly troubled world. And it is to these matters that I now turn. Barbados has virtually every 10 years had to cope with economic shocks imposed upon it by international recession. During the previous crises, the country experienced a kind of V-shaped pattern of activity, a sharp decline followed by a relatively sharp rebound. Our present circumstances are no different. The recessionary forces have lasted longer than usual and there has been no dynamic recovery. The country is, in consequence, now beset by a multifaceted range of economic problems which affect the macroeconomy, all the productive sectors, the state, the households, private sector enterprise, and the labour market. Problems which are all reinforcing each other in a negative way and unchecked will lead to the economy becoming caught up in a fatal spiral downwards. All of the problems coalesce around two strategic challenges whose resolution will make all of the difference between our society's success and our society's failure. The first challenge is to correct the massive crisis in our country's public finances. The second challenge is to find the correct mix of policies and programs by which to put this country and its economy back on a growth path, and to create an environment within which sustainable development thereafter can be realized. For a successful outcome to be assured, the response to these two fundamental challenges must be linked and must be harmonized. To be specific, the effort to stabilize the fiscal position and to reduce the debt burden must be complemented by transformational policies and reforms designed to underpin and to enhance the country's competitive position and thereby to create the potential for growth. I deal first with solving the fiscal crisis. It is impossible to overstate the significance of well-ordered fiscal management in the affairs of a small open economy which has a fixed exchange rate such as Barbados. Large and sustained fiscal deficits are the source of countries' debt problems, can undermine the private sector's access to credit to support its operations and investment, and if financed by the printing of money on a large scale, will put pressure on the country's foreign exchange reserves and eventually the exchange rate itself. The economic landscape of many developing countries is therefore littered by the economic wreckage which has been caused by rampant indiscipline in the management of such countries' public finances. To avoid such a calamity, guidelines have been set and generally followed in Barbados, whereby the overall fiscal deficit is kept in check, averaging around 2.5% of GDP on a sustained basis. And to give meaning to this, to join the European Union, countries must have a deficit of about 3% of GDP. So setting numbers at 2.5 keep us within international benchmarks. Indeed, between 1991 and 2008, except for 3 occasions, the deficit has been contained to less than 2.5% of the GDP, an average 2.1% of the GDP over the 16-year period. In March 2007, I spoke as Minister of Finance in the budget debate in the following terms, and I quote: "Significantly, the overall national debt at the end of the fiscal year is 71% of GDP, as compared to 77% for the previous year. Notwithstanding, we propose to institute measures to reduce the public debt to GDP to under 60% by 2012. Next fiscal year's expenditures will still reflect funding of World Cup-related activities, and the projected fiscal deficit for the next financial year is projected to be 1.9% of GDP. However, in pursuit of the debt management strategy I have just described, we propose to amend our fiscal stance and to set a new target for the overall fiscal deficit of 1% of GDP and primary services in the region of over 4% as compared to 3% of GDP, which have been realized over the past 16 years. To live within our fiscal and debt management means we now have to be circumspect in creating more social entitlements, save and accept in favor of the truly needy, and to reform some of our entitlement programs to eliminate expenditure-based. End of quote. The central bank report indicates that for the January to December 2007 period, the overall fiscal deficit amounted to 1.7% of the GDP. Since then, the overall fiscal deficit has been allowed to vary significantly from the historic target of 2.5% of the GDP, and in recent years has exceeded 8%, 3 times the level judged to be sustainable. This crisis is now so overwhelming that if it is not resolved, nothing else that our nation is trying to achieve will be accomplished, and it is likely that all of the post-independence gain in our standard of living will be wiped out. The crisis has many dimensions. The size of the government debt now exceeds the value of what the country produces, and it is growing at such a rate that a day could come when the servicing of the debt becomes so large as to leave little or no revenue to pay for the vital services government provides to our people. Secondly, since 2007, the debt has been incurred to do the wrong things, not to create assets or to build for the future, but largely to pay current bills. And this indiscipline has been carried out on a large and frightening scale, amounting to over $500 million a year over the period. Third, the financial system, although still liquid, is not prepared to invest anymore in government securities on a large scale to help finance the deficit. It is losing confidence. Fourth, the national insurance is reaching limits of prudence in its financial and government operations. It is not only holding a lot of government securities, it is also investing in the number of buildings which will be leased to the government, and is also being asked to lend directly to a number of institutions whose operations the government should be paying for directly. Hence, the significance of the recent revelation that with virtually all options exhausted, the central bank has had to provide $150 million in financing for the government in August and September, and it is set to be a main financier to government for the rest of the year. Such funds did not come from the income the bank has earned, but from the money the bank has had to print. Some options in dealing with the fiscal crisis have been already exhausted with disastrous consequences. The first recourse of the government was to sharply raise tax rates and fees rather than relying upon the growth of the economy to increase its revenues. In so doing, in our judgment, it merely worsened and deepened the recession and has created extraordinary hardship for firms and households all across Barbados. Its next and current policy was to try to deal with the crisis by tinkering and creative accounting. Some institutions which depend upon the government, UWA, the Transport Board, QA, BTA, are to borrow directly from the national insurance to meet their financial needs rather than get their funds from the government. This will stop. It can. But what will happen next year? Will they have to borrow again from the national insurance? If the level of the government support for this institution is to be capped at the level of funding government is providing them directly, what adjustments in their provision of services to the public are implied with the policy of the government? And then will the public be told? Making adjustments to deal with the fiscal crisis of the magnitude that faces Barbados will require careful and imaginative planning and execution of any adjustments that have been made, strong discipline to do what has to be done, and the bring to bear of innovative policies to ensure that the country is not destabilized because a major problem has to be solved. Any such adjustments must be based upon a sober appreciation of the forces which are generating the fiscal imbalances themselves. Today, say that to the extent that part of the deterioration in the fiscal position has been due to a decline in government's revenues, that element can be attributed to the recessionary forces that have been buffeting the economy. A significant part of the fiscal crisis has been the result of the failure to contain expenditure. In this regard, new entitlement programs have been introduced, and I told you earlier, I told my cabinet, no new entitlement programs. New entitlement programs have been introduced, and there has been a surge of spending on activities more for their partisan political impact than for their contributions to economic growth and national development. That said, there is a fundamental strategic matter that must be carefully addressed in any program to correct this country's fiscal deficit. Much of Barbados' development has been made possible by the institutional resources and the skills that have been created by our sustained investment by our governments in the development of this country's social capital. Indeed, the latest Global Competitiveness Report of the World Economic Forum for 2011 attributes Barbados' 42nd place ranking not on its macroeconomic performance, but on the strength of its capacities in the critical social areas such as education and health. Investment in the creation of social capital has to date been the driving force behind Barbados' development. It is, however, conceivable that in the course of a country's evolution, the social sector may, however temporary, become too large a burden for the economy to carry. At such a stage, it behoves the society to make carefully considered adjustments to the terms of access of its citizens to social services, the mechanisms by which social capital is created, and the relative role of the state and the citizen in meeting the citizens' basic needs. Today say that we are at such a time and place in this country's evolution. The time is ripe for innovative and creative approaches to be applied to bring harmony to our social and economic development, all within the context of a sound fiscal position. First, if adjustments have to be made to the access Barbadians have long enjoyed to public funded healthcare and education services, the adjustments should not take the form of crude across-the-board cuts, which bear equally on everybody in like fashion. Those who are below the poverty line, those below the threshold at which income tax is paid, and special groups of our citizens facing special circumstances and disadvantages, such as the disabled, must continue to enjoy free access to the services which government provides. The rest of the society should be put in a position to benefit from a new program of fiscal incentives for social transformation. If it becomes necessary that those of our citizens who do not fall into the vulnerable groups which I mentioned should no longer have free access to services because government has to fix its fiscal problems, there are ways to take much of the financial pain out of the way such an adjustment should affect them. If people above the income tax threshold now have to pay for their drugs, they should be allowed to claim any such new spending as a credit against their income tax. If Barbadians will have to pay for health care and access to tertiary education in the future, they should be provided with new tax incentives so that they can do for themselves what the government used to do for them. It should be made possible for people to be able to invest in health insurance policies and to claim such expenses as deductions against their income tax. Our citizens should also be able to plan for the university education of their children by the government modifying the existing education saving plan to allow them to claim the full contributions to such plan against their tax payable, rather than the benefit that they now enjoy, that of relief only from the withholding tax on the interest earned by these plans. And if the government of Barbados is not able to build and operate new schools or to provide new healthcare facilities, why not put in place new incentives such that these areas become attractive for private investment on the condition that some access is guaranteed for classes of persons whom the government wishes to have access to the services. Now we forget that education in Barbados is not public only. There's large private investment in these interests. Private investors are even now building modern secondary schools in Barbados. Private investors also want to build modern hospitals to provide care that the QEH cannot provide, and to offer services in Barbados that are not available in the rest of the Caribbean. Education and health can be made to be growth areas for Barbados in the future. For these are precisely the areas where we have the skills and the institutional capacities in the private sector that can be pressed into service to enable the country to meet the basic needs of the people that the government has traditionally paid for. We can therefore solve our fiscal problems and attend to the needs of the people at the same time by converting our problems and our challenges into new opportunities for private initiatives. There are two additional sets of initiatives which must be pressed into service to create the confidence that the country will surmount its fiscal crisis. First, the government is asset rich, but cash strapped. Privatization of some of the government's commercial assets should be undertaken on the understanding that the proceeds should be used entirely to pay down the public debt. There should also be a moratorium on government's financial involvement in commercial enterprise, especially in the form of the assumption of new debt by government to bring those enterprises into existence, a matter that I will have to address later. Secondly, at this stage in Barbados' development, there is still a need for public sector capital programs. I think immediately of the need for a West Coast sewerage system and the need to continue the investment in our tourism facilities to enable Barbados to fetch 5-star prices for offering 5-star attractions. Such investment should be carried out through public-private sector partnerships, and new rules of public procurement should be established to make such partnerships both transparent and widespread. I deal next with a framework for renewed growth and development. In addition to dealing with a fiscal crisis, Barbados must find a way to grow and to develop itself out of its current difficulties, and to deploy new policy instruments and programs to make such growth sustainable. The Barbados economy in ordinary time need to grow at about 3 and 3.5% per year to give us the confidence that the country's social and economic needs will be met. The recent growth experience of 0.2% in 2010 and the projected 1% growth for 2011 therefore represents a clear case of underperformance and raises the real danger of the country falling behind in the race for development. There's already clear evidence of underinvestment. Domestic investment in 2010 was significantly below the level of investment in 2005, and domestic investment has fallen in real terms by 43% since 2007. In addition, what started as a recession in the macroeconomy is now morphing into a crisis at the enterprise level in Barbados. Indeed, a large cross-section of the Barbados private sector is under severe financial stress, reporting low or no profits. And Barbados is therefore likely to emerge in a few years as an economy with its production capacity seriously impaired, a victim of too long a period of underinvestment, and a victim of lack of innovation. The household sector, beleaguered by a substantial loss of purchasing power, is also unable to contribute to the stimulation of demand necessary to support growth. In such an environment, the question that arises is that as to what are to be the sources of the growth that we need, and what kind of new policy initiatives must be required to bring the economy out of its present doldrums. The answer is that Barbados' growth will depend more than ever on its capacity to transform itself into a producer and exporter of high-value services, and its capacity to take advantage of the opportunities that still exist in the global economy for small countries to successfully occupy knowledge-based and technologically sensitive niches. Last year at the BCCI event, I indicated that such growth can best be engendered by the aggressive development of Barbados as an important international business and financial center. For that is where the real potential for robust growth in Barbados resides. It is where we have our greatest comparative advantage, but where we have only scratched the surface in making full use of that advantage. Robust growth in this sector should come not just from issuing more licenses to existing types of business, but from radically diversifying the product mix of the sector. In this regard, there's much to be gained from broadening the scope of the sector to encompass new asset management companies, to make Barbados a location for the clustering of family offices, to put in place a regime to attract high net worth individuals, to offer Barbados as a location for arbitration, to establish a floor for Barbados for international trading in securities. These opportunities exist because of the superior infrastructural, governance, institutional, and human resource capacities that exist in Barbados in absolute terms and relative to those of competing jurisdictions. It is therefore regrettable that this opportunity is being squandered, as evidenced by the report that over the course of the past 3 years, Barbados has missed out on $1 billion US on investments and income and over 2,700 jobs because of our failure to act. Such failures are tantamount to our domestic equivalents of a crime against humanity. Barbados' transformation into a fully developed service economy must and can be accelerated by the implementation of already articulated policy frameworks to develop our cultural and our creative industries, to make the greening of Barbados an economic opportunity, and to facilitate the development of alternative energy resources. Frameworks for these already exist. Implement. And as a mature service economy, the tourism sector still has much to contribute to Barbados' growth and development. But this can only be accomplished if our national focus is on developing our tourism product as a premium product to fetch premium prices. Deviation from this course in respect of tourism, as indeed any further deviation from the task of accelerating the development of all of our service industries, will weaken our prospects of recovery from the current recession. Barbados' prospects from emerging from its present economic morass will especially also rest on the successful deployment of new policies for transformation that exactly meet the exacting requirements of a volatile marketplace. We have really come to a bend in the river. There was a time when industries and enterprise in Barbados, especially in manufacturing and agriculture, could be formed and fostered to take advantage of protectionist devices such as quotas and import licenses. That era ended with the coming into existence of WTO trade rules in 1994. Our economic system was also shaped in the past by access to one-way duty-free access to external markets. With the coming into existence of the EPA, that age of preferences in Barbados is coming to an end this year. In addition, a significant part of our international financial industry was spawned to take advantage of a special tax concession with Canada, the exempt surplus arrangement, that was not available to competing Caribbean jurisdictions. That concession is no longer available to us only in the Caribbean. Moreover, a lot of enterprise in Barbados was made possible by the provision of a number of fiscal incentives which have been judged to be incompatible with Article 27.4 of the WTO's Agreement on Subsidies and Countervailing Duties. We have therefore to contemplate a 2005 a post-2015 existence in which these fiscal incentives are substantially modified to bring them into conformity with international trade rules. In the light of these new and evolving circumstances, it should be clear that we will have to bring to bear new policies to encourage enterprises to be established in Barbados, and once established to stay here and to thrive here in a more competitive but unstable global economic arena. In the period between 1998 and 2008, a number of transformational policies were employed to reposition the Barbados economy, to enable it to accommodate drastic changes occasioned by the application of WTO rules, to facilitate our participation in the CSME and other programs of economic liberalization, and to cope with the economic forces which ensued from the revolution in information technology. A second generation of transformational policies is now required to enable Barbados to thrive in a more competitive global economy without now the benefit of the kind of protectionist or preferential arrangements that were available to us in the past. And there is hope. Both the World Bank report on the ease of doing business for this year and the World Economic Forum's Global Competitiveness Report for 2011-2012 substantiate that some of the most successful and competitive economies for these years are now small economies which have mastered the use of intangible assets such as best practices in respect of business facilitation, strong reliance on entrepreneurship and innovation, the effective utilization of new information technology, strong, transparent, and effective government arrangements that ensure transparency in all economic transactions, and the transformation of the public sector decision-making arrangements into aids to decision-making. But these are precisely some of the areas in which we have labored our own development with excessive constraints. To progress in a global arena that will remain volatile, Barbados will have to aspire to international best practice in relation to the arrangements that are made to govern the conditions for doing business in this country. And after reaching that level of international best practice, we must thereafter accept no half measures in keeping our environment free of the constraints on doing business in this country. We have perhaps lived in a country where we have grown to love our chains and have come to regard them as wings. In this vein, A new generation of transformational policies appropriate to the circumstances we will face in the future can and should be built around the following 6 imperatives. First, the specific proposals of Barbados Entrepreneurship Foundation to make entrepreneurship the cutting-edge tool in national development must be accepted and acted upon. Secondly, all of the constraints and impediments of an administrative or bureaucratic nature that stand in the way of doing business must be removed. Third, the information technology capabilities in both the public and the public sector must be systematically enhanced. Fourth, we must recast our human resource development strategies to reflect the requirements of the economy as it is likely to evolve, rather than the requirements of the economy as they have existed in the past. Fifth, to the extent that a productive and motivated labor force is vital to national development, we must design and implement an incomes policy for both the public and the private sector that rewards and stimulate productivity, stimulate innovation, and stimulate initiative. And 6, we must devise new policies to encourage the financial sector to support the activities of entrepreneurs and risk-takers. I have already elsewhere proposed that such initiatives should be led by the Prime Minister's office through a new agency for business facilitation and a new commission for national development, and I wish to reiterate the necessity for such economic leadership today. I close by touching on 2 matters without which this presentation will not be complete. First, Barbados stands to benefit more than any Caribbean country from the successful completion of the Caribbean single market and economy. The regional market accounts for over 50% of our commodity trade. I could also add we sell $500 million in exports and re-exports to the rest of the region that carries out the distributive sector. A lot of tourism, most of these services. So it's over 50% of our commodity trade is CARICOM. That's compared to 2%, between 2% and 5% for Jamaica. If the CSME vanishes, it does not affect Barbados, but the regional economy is our oyster. More to the point, the next phase of the development of the CSME was, among other things, intended to see the harmonization, the simplification, and the standardization of business conditions all across the region, leading to potentially large cost savings for entities running into the millions doing business in the Caribbean. In such circumstances, it would be a strategic error to continue to postpone the realization of such benefits to the business community that can come from creating a virtuous single regional economy. Secondly, the need to report progress in a difficult environment should not lead us to make unsound decisions. In this vein, how we proceed in respect of the Four Seasons project can become the metaphor that reflects both the spirit and the substance of our future development. Earlier, I urged that the government of Barbados should refrain from getting directly involved as the owner of commercial enterprise. The Four Seasons project is taking place on the last remaining parcel of land of its size on the west coast of Barbados. For that very reason alone, it should be able to attract private investment. Indeed, it was conceived and approved to be an entirely private initiative. The planning and the implementation of the project should be made to proceed entirely on the merits of the supporting financial analysis and on its merits as a private investment rather than on the basis of any political calculation. This especially should apply in respect of the involvement of the National Insurance Scheme. Above all, if a private developer cannot be encouraged to come in as a partner in what should be a private investment, then the NAS should not be required to assume on its own the full risks that are now being noted. In preparing for this address, I had the benefit of reading a new book by Thomas Friedman and Michael Mandelbaum entitled That Used to Be Us. It characterizes and chronicles how the United States has fallen behind in the very world that it invented. We have come to this bend in the river as the world's leading developing society. It is a platform which we must use to go to a higher level of development. We can, however, fail to do what needs to be done. Should this be the case, as other countries press on with their development, we might have someday to say of ourselves, that used to be us. I trust that such a day will never come, and that engagement such as this today will ensure that Barbados' best days are still ahead of us. We thank you for the opportunity to do this.